I dag så skal vi møte en ekte greve. En vassekte greve. Det blir gøy det. Hei og hjertelig velkommen til en ny episode av Kjell Svinkjeller med Tom Omrati Løvås fra Drinkfeed og meg selv. Og i dag, Tom, så skal vi møte en greve.
Ja, det skal vi. Det blir mye blått blod i dag. Som, vi skal ikke blande den opp i vinen, men det er veldig stas, dette her. Men, vedkommende som vi har med oss i studio er jo er blitt nesten en levende legende fra sitt område. Familien hans har jo vært der i flere generasjoner, i hvert fall 2, og de har drevet med. Altså, vi kommer til det alt det der sånn tvert, men jeg gleder meg veldig. Dette blir veldig spennende.
Ja, altså det er jo ikke hver gang vi får lov å henge med adelen. Det er jo ikke hverdagskost selv for oss, selv om vi virker som noen ordentlige adletyper.
Altså jeg henger jo med selvfølgelig fiffen hele tiden, så for meg, neida. Det som er litt morsomt er jo at landet som han kommer fra har jo ikke en adel lenger. Han har bare en titel. Men likevel skal vi bare introdusere han og sette i gang.
Vi kan jo begynne med det.
Da slår vi over på engelsk da.
Yes, let's take it over in English. And welcome to our podcast.
Hello, good morning.
And with us today we have Francesco.
That's me.
Count of Cinzano,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah. That's right.
And you're sort of a living legend in your area now. You've been there for like ever. Both Kjell-Gabriel and I have visited your place, and you've always been there.
Yes, well, I took over in 91, so it's been a long time, been more than 30 years now.
It was your father who founded the estate.
My father arrived in Montalcino in 1973, and he found this opportunity, the Col d'Orcia opportunity. It was a very different time, and we're actually celebrating 50 years this year, the next month in November of the arrival. And the feature that always surprises me is that in those days and up until the very early 80s, Montalcino was known in Italy for being one of the poorest municipalities in the land. And so the number of bottles of Brunello was really very, very small. It was a very different scenario to what we have today.
But was Brunello looked upon as a serious wine at that point, or was it just another wine?
For the very few people that knew about Brunello, yes, it was a serious wine, and of course the Bjorn di Santi wine was around, and it was well known among a very small circle of people, especially in Rome. But if you went to Milan or to the north of Italy, nobody knew what Brunello was in those days. So it was a very small reality.
So you can say that the Brunello area is from the 90s and up to now?
Yes, the great breakthrough happens in 1995 when the US market discovers the Brunello di Montalcino in 1990. You know, it takes 5 years for the wine to come out. So in 95, the great vintage, the historic vintage of 1990 arrived on the market, and it was noticed by the wine writers. They started publishing about it, and that's when the fortunes of Brunello started. And then in 96, the Reserva 1990 came out a year later, and that really sort of made the front page of wine magazines and so on.
How did you find your way into the wine industry? You told us before that you're not a winemaker, you're a farmer.
Well, yes, I have become a farmer. My family has produced wines for many generations. We are from the area of Torino in the north of Italy, and the family goes back to the 16th century, late 16th century, when we were producing, had license to produce wines and distilled spirits for the city of Turin and the city of Chieri, the surrounding. And then after the Napoleonic Wars, after the French Revolution, we moved into the city. We moved to the center of Torino and continued the trade and vermouth, and then the collaboration with the royal family of Piedmont, of Sardinia, where my ancestors were put in charge of developing the wine industry of the area of Asti. So my forefathers, they contributed to the creation of Asti Spumante, for instance, and of course vermouth, which was very typical of Torino, and the ambassadors from the state of Savoy, the state of Torino, used to bring vermouth to the different capitals of the world where they traveled, and we were supplying the royal house, and then we were put in charge of the cellars in Santa Vittoria d'Alba, so near Alba, so between Alba and Bra, and near the property which is still today fairly well known, Pollenzo, where we have the University of Gastronomic Sciences, and I contributed. I'm a founding member of that university. And anyway, eventually then my ancestors rented the royal cellars and finally purchased them, and then my father had a kind of fascination with Tuscany. Who doesn't? And so he decided to bring this property, to buy this property, and to make sure that we didn't want to go there because it was so poor and the roads were so bad to get to Montalcino. They took a very long time to drive there. So he celebrated his 50th birthday. He brought all the family. We were all compelled to go there because it was his birthday, and that's how he introduced us to the place. And then, the facts of life and everything else, and I found myself with this unique farm in Montalcino, and I became a farmer. I reinvented myself as a farmer.
And of course, you are growing grapes.
I'm growing grapes, but as you can see this year with the very difficult weather conditions that we're seeing in the vineyards in Italy, and not only in the Mediterranean area, the biodiversity, the polyculture, in other words, having different crops growing together and making sure that they are part of the biodiversity of the area is an essential element of healthiness. Because you work on something which is a bit ethereal, a bit difficult to measure scientifically, but it's the biological control. And biological control means that any sanitary problem finds a solution in nature. So if you have a worm that's eating the leaves of your vines, it's important that you have the bird that eats the worm, and so on. So that's what we work on, and that's why I define myself a farmer, because you can't do only grapes by themselves.
I know that you lived for 10 years in Chile. Why?
Well, when I took over Cordorcha in 1991, I had a very capable general manager who was running the day-to-day of the estate, and I had a young family. My wife wanted adventure. Women always want adventure, don't they? And so when I said, let's go to Montalcino, she, I married you to travel the world, not to live in Italy. And so in those days, the dictatorship had just finished in Chile. The wine industry was emerging. They were starting to export. It was the right place, the right time, the right place. And so also to grow a family, to educate children. And so we moved there. And I was lucky enough to be able to start with a clean sheet of paper. And so I went back to what the very early conquistadores, the early colonizers, did. And they chose an area which is today known as Maule Valley, Maule, Biobío, Itata. And that's where I went. The Chilean wine producers at the time thought, they called me the mad Italian, I was going to a place where I was asking real estate agents to find me properties in the area. And they kept sending me proposals from other areas of Chile, from other regions. I said, why don't you send me a proposal from Maule? Well, I'm not sending you proposals from Maule because there is nothing there, they used to say. And only small farmers and very old vineyards, pre-phylloxera, no rootstocks. 100-year-old, 150-year-old monuments of nature, beautiful plants. And so that's where I went. And then in Chile in those days, the availability of genetic material, plant material, was very scarce because there are sanitary barriers to the importation of plant material in Chile. So I did precisely that. I started importing.
But did you bring your Italian wine mentality, or did you try to learn the Chilean wine mentality?
The wine mentality is the same the world around. What I found were farmers, local farmers in Chile, who knew how to prune the vine, how to look after the vine. And then I brought more of a modern view to the winery, to the vinification, to the equipment, to the choice of genetic material in the vineyard. But the wine culture is very strong in Chile. They've produced wines since the beginning of the colonies. So no, I didn't have to teach them anything. I learned from them. I learned how to protect, how to respect nature. Because, in the Andes civilization, in the Inca civilization, the most important god is Pachamama, Mother Earth. So a farmer always dedicates a thought to Pachamama every morning when he goes to work in the field, thankful for the crops you have harvested and the ones that are coming. And so you learn a very special relationship with nature, how to seek balance, harmony with the environment. And that I brought back to Italy, as opposed to me bringing from Italy to Chile. Because
you returned to Italy in 2006, if I recall.
Yeah, 2005, 2006, we came back, and by then the general manager was retiring, and so I took over the day-to-day running of the estate as well.
Are you still involved with the Chilean enterprise?
It's called Erasmo. Yes, and it was always a partnership with a local family that owns a very beautiful land on the riverbanks of an affluent to the Maule River, an affluent that has a very difficult name, Virkelig, very very ancient name from pre-colonial civilization, and now I pass it on to the younger generation. I'm concentrating on Col d'Orcia, and my sons and the new generation of our partners are running the show, or supposed to run the show now.
Do you have any overall visions for Col d'Orcia? What you want to bring forward?
Well, that's a good question. Well, that's a job for my children, for the next generation. My eldest son is working very much on beer, on production of agricultural beer. So we're growing barley for the production of. There you go. And we are producing honey. We're producing a number of other crops, and so he's looking after that. My second son is very keen on producing a new concept of selection of the grapes for Brunello di Montalcino. So it has to be their vision. I'm working on sustainability, and we are going to obtain now the sustainable certification. We have the organic certification since the year 2010. So I started quite early in that respect. And I'm getting, next month, I'm getting a lifetime award from Slow Food, from Slow Wine. So I've done my job.
Certainly.
It's their turn now.
I was thinking maybe we could, as everybody's have been listening into that, we have poured some wine in our glasses. It's Brunello di Montalcino, and it's the
2018
vintage.
Vintage. Yeah.
Can you take us through this tasting with this wine?
Well, I use only my own grapes, so it says Col d'Orcia on the front label. So it's the hill overlooking the Orcia River. We are on the southern part of Montalcino. We are on the part of Montalcino closest to the Mediterranean Sea, most influenced by the sea winds. from 100 meters over sea level up to 400 meters. And this Brunello is a blend of all the Sangiovese vineyards we have on that hill. And we harvest pretty early because we are not so high over sea level and because we are on the southern part, so more exposed to the sun. So usually we start around mid-September. We harvest between mid-September and mid-October. It's a very traditional kind of Brunello di Montalcino. Traditional because we use the large barrels of the tradition, but also the style of wine. We always think about the dinner table when we produce our wines, because we feel that the traditional role of wine is a part of the food experience. So a lot of freshness, protecting the acidity when we harvest the grapes is our main concern, so that we have a brightness, a drinkability of pairing with food, and the capacity to age are the aspects. 2018 was a good year in terms of climate, considering the situations we have these days with climatic change. And we had some rain and not excessive heat during the last part of the ripening. So slow and even ripening with, as I said, a few small showers of rain, which helped to prolong the ripening and the harvesting season. So a nicely balanced wine. And let me taste here. So the brightness of the red fruit already to the nose, I think you can notice that, and a few aromatic elements typical of the Mediterranean shrub, the Mediterranean woodland. So rosemary and sage, and a bit of flower as well.
Would you say that this is a typical imprint of the wines you like to make?
Yes, very much so. It's the aspect, is when I compare myself with other producers, and we do that quite often. Sometimes we invite other producers to our tasting room, and we blind taste a few producers. We always watch the first glass that's emptied. And it's not necessarily the one that gets the greatest ratings or the highest scores. It's the one you want to drink the most. And that's what we've been doing in my family for generations. Always mindful of quality, mindful of the fact that it's food. It's something you put into your body. And if we are what we eat and drink, then it's important that it's clean. It's perfectly made, without faults, without contamination of any kind. So that's our philosophy.
You said a little bit about the climate change. Mm-hmm. How is that influencing your wine production?
Well, in a big way, definitely. I think what's important to do is to watch and learn from what's happening in the vineyard. Because the plants are not just taking the climatic change without, they are reacting, they are evolving. So as I like to say, we're back to the theory of evolution and Darwin. And for instance, in the last drought in 2021, we have seen different behavior of the plant compared with 2017. The vines are equipping themselves to persist to heat waves, drought, and the lack of water in the soil. For instance, we have noticed a greater tendency by the vines to accumulate calcium. The professor of the University of Florence with whom we worked told me it's the plant is building stronger walls of the cellular walls of the skins of the grapes to defend itself from direct sunlight, from dehydration.
So the skin is getting thicker?
In a chemical composition, yes, it is stronger, more than thicker. Let's not say thicker, otherwise my winemaker is going to harvest in January.
Yeah. But have you starting to harvest earlier than you did before?
We have had to harvest earlier, yes, because it happens like in 2017 where some parts of the vineyards were not harvested because the grapes had not dehydrated. They had completely dried up. There was nothing left, really. So we don't defoliate anymore. We make sure that the grapes, the fruits are in the shade of the leaves of the plant, and we remove the cover crops, the green manure from the vineyard earlier. We change the direction of the rows where we plant new vineyards, as opposed to going in the direction of the maximum slope. We try to go against the slope to retain as much water as possible, and a whole lot of other practices, clonal selection, and in any event, we need to protect the acidity. So before the acidity starts falling, we have to bring the grapes into the cellar to have the freshness that, even though in 2018 we had a heat wave in July, beginning of August, but we managed to maintain the freshness, and we can notice in this glass.
Yeah, the freshness is and acidity is almost perfect in my palate.
I'm so lucky that I have tasted 19 and 21 of your wine, because I tasted it on the barrels in April.
Yes.
So when you talk about 21, I say, oh, I tasted it already. And that's the cool thing. If you visit your winery, you have the possibility to taste things from the barrels and see the development. And then you see that the wines are young and a lot of freshness, but they're not balanced yet. And you come out, and this is the final result now. But of course, you can drink this in 20 years as well.
Yes, well, that's the other aspect. We consider that the core value of Brunello is ageability. So we want to make sure that, because if you give it time, it develops, it gains in complexity, it becomes softer, and the sensations, the emotions are so much stronger.
But do you want to make the wine taste about the same every year, or do you want to have diversity?
No, there is diversity. Well, we are allowed legally and by protocol of production to mix up to 15% of any vintage available in the cellar. So in 2018, you will have 85% of 2018, and then about 15% from other harvests. So that helps to reduce the difference between one vintage and the other. But as I say, each vintage has to be the son or daughter of the climate of that year. And so we want differences, but we don't want to surprise the consumer. If you're a Brunello consumer and you drink a bottle of Brunello for a celebration this year, next year when you go and get the same bottle for the same celebration, you don't want a surprise. You want the same pleasure. And that's what we have to ensure, that we give the same pleasure year after year.
Thank you so much, Francesco, for sharing your time with us and talk about your beautiful place in Caldorcia and Montalcino and everything. And it's been a real pleasure to have you aboard our show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And one last word. We like to receive visitors. We have a lot to show on the estate, so come and visit.
I was there. I've been there twice with groups, and the last time I was there, one of the group members just went out in your beautiful garden and just lay under the tree for half an hour. And we forgot him. So, where's Mario? Oh, he's under the tree over there. He thought it was excellent. So, yeah, everybody should visit. Men nå, Tom, det har vært hyggelig.
Dette har vært kjempehyggelig og veldig interessant. Og jeg mener, det er jo en, som jeg sa, nesten en levende legende. Han er jo nestor i Montalcino også, og er jo involvert i utviklingen av området, vinmessig sett. Og også faktisk en ganske visjonær fyr i forhold til det å tenke på miljø og, som vi hørte, mikrobiologi, klima rundt og alt mulig rart. Altså, en veldig visjonær kar. Den vinen vi har smakt, skal vi si noe om den?
Vi kan si noe om den. Det er da Brunello Montalcino, det er også 2018.
Og
koster rundt 300 og noen kroner.
75 faktisk.
Ja.
Og det den verdt.
Ja, som sagt, jeg har jo vært der, jeg var jo der nylig, eller nå i mai, april, og fikk da smake fra to på fat, og denne her, og helt tilbake til 1981. Dette her er noe av det bedre, om du ikke sier topp 3 av Montalcinoer i mitt lille univers.
Jeg til dels enig, altså. Jeg må bare få lov å si at jeg også har vært her da.
Ja.
Liksom,
du har vært her 2 ganger du også?
Jeg har vært her 2 ganger. Men da hadde vi sånn linjesmaking, altså årgangssmaking, og denne var vel bare på fat da jeg var der sist, og den hadde ikke blitt tappet ennå. Vi gledet oss veldig til den kommer, eller at skulle komme, og den innfrir til de grader. Jeg synes at hør denne episoden og kjøp vin og kos deg med den til hva du nå ønsker av god mat på kvelden.
Og du vimser du rundt ned i Toskana sør for Siena, så det bare å bestille smaking der. Da får du det Toskana Experience, som de kaller det. Da får du 5, 6, 7 årganger. Det kjempegøy.
Da runder vi runder av fra Oslo / Toskana / Skilo.
Ja, takk for at du lytter. Jeg heter Kjell-Gabriel Henriks.
Tom Amiratiløvås.
Ha det bra.